1 month after the coronation, the photograph had achieved something unprecedented in the modern royal era. It had fundamentally changed how people around the world viewed the British monarchy. Public opinion polls showed significant increases in approval ratings for both William and Catherine, with many respondents specifically citing the tiara moment as evidence of their genuine partnership and humanity. The long-term impact was becoming clearer as behavioral scientists and sociologists began studying the phenomenon. Dr. James Harrison, relationship researcher at Cambridge University, published a paper examining how the image had influenced public discourse about marriage and partnership. "We're seeing couples reference this moment in therapy sessions," he noted, using it as an example of the kind of supportive behavior they want to cultivate in their own relationships. Catherine and William were beginning to understand the profound effect their moment had created. During a private conversation with King Charles, William reflected on how a simple gesture had resonated so deeply with people worldwide. "I think people are hungry for authenticity," he told his father, "especially from public figures. Maybe we've been too formal, too distant for too long." The photograph had also influenced how other royal families around the world approached their public appearances. Royal correspondents noted that European monarchies were showing more personal warmth in their official photographs and public interactions, seemingly inspired by the positive response to William and Catherine's natural affection. Social media platforms were reporting that the hashtags associated with the moment continued to trend months later. Hashtag royalty or a moment, hashtag William and Kate, and hashtag coronation love were still being used thousands of times daily. Often attached to posts about other couples celebrating their own relationships or marking anniversaries and milestones, the image had transcended its original context to become a broader symbol of partnership and mutual support. Marriage equality advocates were using it to illustrate their vision of loving, supportive relationships regardless of gender. Workplace equality consultants were referencing it as an example of how partners could support each other's professional success without diminishing their own standing. Educational institutions were incorporating the photograph into curricula beyond just media studies. History classes were using it to discuss how royal imagery had evolved over centuries. Sociology courses examined it as an example of how social media could amplify and transform the meaning of public moments. Psychology professors used it to explore nonverbal communication and the psychology of viral content. The fashion industry had been permanently influenced by the moment as well. Bridal designers reported unprecedented demand for tiara-style headpieces, with many specifically requesting replicas of Catherine's crystal and pearl leaf tiara design. The waiting list for pieces by the original designer stretched into the following year. International diplomatic relationships had subtly shifted as well. Foreign diplomats regularly mentioned the photograph during meetings with British officials, often using it as a conversation starter or as evidence of Britain's cultural influence. The soft power generated by this single moment was being leveraged. In trade discussions and cultural exchange programs, the charitable sector had benefited unexpectedly from the viral moment. Organizations focused on marriage counseling and relationship support reported significant increases in donations and volunteer applications, with many supporters specifically mentioning how the royal couple's example had inspired them to invest. In supporting other relationships, major advertising agencies were studying the photograph too. Understand what made certain images resonate so powerfully across different cultures and demographics. Marketing professionals were trying to identify the elements that could be incorporated into campaigns. Though most acknowledged that the authenticity of the original moment could not be manufactured, the photograph had entered academic discourse. As well, art historians were comparing it to famous romantic paintings and sculptures throughout history, noting how it captured similar themes of protection, devotion, and partnership. Literature professors were drawing connections to romantic poetry and prose, finding parallels in works by authors from Shakespeare to contemporary writers as the first anniversary of the coronation approached. Media outlets were preparing retrospective coverage that would inevitably focus heavily on the tiara moment and its lasting impact. Documentary filmmakers were developing projects exploring how a single photograph had influenced global conversations about love, marriage, and the role of monarchy in the modern world. Catherine and William, now fully aware of their photographs' significance, had begun incorporating more natural, affectionate moments into their public appearances. They understood that their genuine relationship had become one of their most powerful tools for connecting with people and maintaining the monarchy's relevance in a rapidly changing world. The legacy of that windy afternoon on the Buckingham Palace balcony continued to grow. What had begun as a simple gesture of care between husband and wife had evolved into a symbol of enduring love that transcended cultural boundaries, class differences, and generational gaps. In an age of political division and social uncertainty, William and Catherine's moment of tenderness had reminded the world that some things, the most important things, remained constant and beautiful. The crystal and pearl leaf tiara, once simply a piece of royal jewelry, had become an artifact of modern love story. The wind that had threatened to disturb it had instead created a moment that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come. In the end, it wasn't the crowning of a king that had captured the world's heart, but the gentle touch of a husband steadying his wife's crown, reminding everyone that the most powerful royal moments were often the most human ones. 3 days after the coronation, the photograph was still dominating social media conversations around the world. What had begun as a simple moment of marital care had evolved into a global symbol of enduring love and partnership. Media analysts were calling it one of the most powerful royal images of the 21st century, comparable to iconic photographs from previous generations. Dr. Margaret Phillips, professor of media studies at Oxford University, was invited to discuss the phenomenon on BBC's morning program. "What we're seeing here," she explained, "is the intersection of traditional monarchy with modern social media culture. This single gesture has humanized the royal family in a way that years of carefully planned public relations campaigns couldn't achieve." The photograph was inspiring real-world actions beyond social media sharing. Wedding planners reported an increase in inquiries about recreating similar romantic moments at ceremonies. Jewelry stores noted heightened interest in tiara-style headpieces. Even relationship counselors were using the image as an example of how small gestures of care and attention could strengthen long-term partnerships. Catherine and William, meanwhile, were continuing their royal duties, seemingly unaware of how profoundly their moment had affected people worldwide. During a visit to a children's hospital in London, Catherine was approached by a young nurse who mentioned the photograph. "My grandmother saw it on the news," the nurse said, "and she called me to say it reminded her why she still believes in true love after 60 years of marriage." The international diplomatic community had also taken notice. The French ambassador to the United Kingdom mentioned the photograph during a reception, noting how it had improved Britain's soft power and cultural influence abroad. In a single moment, he observed, the Prince and Princess of Wales showed the world that the British monarchy could be both traditional and thoroughly modern. Social media users were creating elaborate analyses of the photograph, breaking down every element from the angle of William's protective gesture to the expression of trust and gratitude on Catherine's face. Art students were using it as a reference for studies in composition and emotional expression. Photography schools were including it in curricula about capturing spontaneous moments in formal settings. The global conversation had taken on deeper dimensions as well. Relationship experts were discussing how the photograph illustrated healthy partnership dynamics. Marriage counselors were using it to demonstrate nonverbal communication between spouses. Even business leadership coaches were referencing it as an example of how to provide support without taking over or diminishing the other person's autonomy. Major fashion magazines were dedicating entire spreads to analyzing Catherine's coronation. Look, with particular focus on the tiara that had become central to the viral moment. Vogue's royal correspondent wrote a detailed piece about the history of the crystal and pearl leaf tiara, tracing its creation and previous appearances, noting how Catherine's wearing of it connected her to the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. The photograph was also being celebrated for its technical excellence. Professional photography organizations were hosting discussions about the perfect timing required to capture such a fleeting moment. The skill needed to balance multiple subjects in the frame, and the way natural lighting had enhanced the emotional impact of the scene. Children around the world were drawing their own versions of the moment in school art classes. Teachers reported that students were creating stories about princes and princesses helping each other, inspired by what they had. Seen in the news coverage, the image was becoming part of a new generation's understanding of what royal fairy tales could look like in the modern world. Celebrity couples were posting their own recreations of the gesture on social media, though none achieved the viral success of the original. The attempts, while often humorous, only served to highlight the genuine nature of William and Catherine's moment. Critics noted that the authenticity of the original could not be manufactured or replicated. News programs were exploring the broader implications of the moment for the monarchy's future. Royal historians discussed how previous generations of royals had maintained much more formal public personas, and how William and Catherine's willingness to show genuine affection in public represented a significant evolution in royal behavior. The economic impact was becoming measurable as well. Tourism organizations reported increased interest in royal-themed tours and experiences. The Coronation had already boosted British tourism, but the viral photograph was extending that interest far beyond the typical royal watching demographic. International news coverage was noting how the photograph had overshadowed other aspects of the coronation ceremony in terms of public engagement. While King Charles's actual crowning had been the historic centerpiece of the day, it was this moment between his son and daughter-in-law that had captured the world's imagination and emotional investment. A week after the coronation, major newspapers were still featuring follow-up stories about the photograph and its impact. The Times of London published a lengthy analysis of how social media transformed the way royal moments were consumed and interpreted by the public. The Guardian explored the feminist implications of the image, noting how it showed a man supporting his wife's public role rather than competing with or overshadowing it. The photograph was being archived by major museums and historical societies as a significant document of early 21st century royal history. The Victoria and Albert Museum announced plans to include it in a future exhibition about the evolution of royal portraiture and public image in the digital age. Within minutes of the balcony moment, the photographs began appearing online. The first posts came from the official royal photographers, their professional images capturing every detail of William's gentle gesture and Catherine's grateful expression. But it was the candid shots from press photographers positioned at different angles that truly captured the emotion of the moment. Sarah Mitchell, a royal correspondent for BBC News, was among the first to post about the moment on Twitter. "All my years covering the royal family," she wrote, "I've never seen a gesture quite so tender or genuine as Prince William steadying Catherine's tiara on the balcony today. This is what true partnership looks like." Her tweet, accompanied by a photograph of the moment, was retweeted over 50,000 times within the first hour. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, the royal family was unaware of the social media storm brewing around that single moment. They had retreated from the balcony for a private family celebration, finally able to relax after the intensity of the public ceremony. Catherine had removed her tiara and was sharing a quiet moment with William when King Charles approached them both. The new king's eyes were bright with emotion as he embraced his son and daughter-in-law. "Thank you both," he said simply, "for everything you've done to support me today, and for everything you'll do for this institution in the years to come." Catherine felt tears threaten again at the sincerity in his voice and the weight of trust he was placing in them. Outside the palace walls, the social media response was growing exponentially. Instagram accounts dedicated to royal fashion were posting close-up images of the tiara moment, with captions analyzing not just Catherine's jewelry choices, but the obvious love and care shown by William. Facebook groups devoted to the royal family were sharing the photographs with comments that ranged from admiring to deeply emotional. Emma Thompson, a mother of 3 from Manchester, posted on Facebook, "I've been married for 15 years. My husband still looks at me the way William looks at Kate. That's how you know it's real love." Her post struck a chord with hundreds of other users who shared their own stories of long-lasting marriages and the small gestures that keep love alive through the years. The international response was equally overwhelming. News outlets from around the world were featuring the photograph on their front pages, with headlines in dozens of languages celebrating the obvious affection between the future king and queen. French newspapers called it un moment de tendresse royale, while German publications described it as ein Märchenwort wahr, a fairy tale come true. Television news programs were dedicating entire segments to analyzing the photograph and what it revealed about William and Catherine's relationship. Royal experts were being interviewed about the significance of such public displays of affection within the traditionally formal structure of the monarchy. Many noted that this kind of spontaneous, genuine interaction was exactly what the royal family needed to remain relevant in the modern world. On TikTok, young users were creating videos set to romantic music, using the photograph as an example of relationship goals. The hashtag Royal Tiara moment was trending worldwide, with millions of views on videos that celebrated not just the gesture itself, but what it represented about love, support, and partnership in marriage. Celebrity social media accounts were also joining the conversation. Actress Emma Stone posted the photograph on her Instagram with the caption, "This is what every woman wants. Someone who will literally hold your crown when the wind threatens to knock it off." The post received over 2 million likes within. Ours professional photographers were praising not just the emotional content of the image, but its technical excellence. The way the afternoon light caught both the tiara and William's protective gesture, it's the perfect positioning of their bodies, the expressions on both their faces. It was being hailed as one of the finest pieces of royal photography in recent memory. Back at Kensington Palace that evening, Catherine and William were finally able to see some of the social media response for themselves. Their press secretary had compiled a selection of the most significant posts and articles, and they spent time reading through the comments and reactions from people around the world. Catherine was particularly moved by the responses from other couples celebrating their own relationships. "Look at this," she said to William, showing him a post from a couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. They said our moment reminded them of their own wedding day, when the wind nearly blew off the bride's veil and her husband caught it just in time. William was amazed by the global reach of the response. "I had no idea people were paying such close attention," he admitted. "It just seemed like the natural thing to do. Your tiara was slipping, so I helped steady it. I would have done the same thing if we were alone in our sitting room." That sentiment, when it was later shared in a brief statement from Kensington Palace, only intensified the positive response. People were moved by William's casual acknowledgement that his gesture hadn't been calculated for public consumption. It was simply the natural response of a caring husband, protecting his wife. The photograph was being analyzed from every possible angle. Fashion experts discussed the craftsmanship of the tiara and how the wind had threatened to disturb its careful placement. Body language experts noted the comfortable intimacy between William and Catherine, the way they moved together, as if they were dancing. The complete trust Catherine showed in allowing William to handle such a delicate and valuable piece of jewelry. By the end of that first day, the photograph had been shared over 10 million times across all social media platforms. It was appearing on newspaper front pages around the world, being discussed on television programs, and inspiring countless articles about love, marriage, and the modernization of the British monarchy. The royal procession back to Buckingham Palace began with all the pageantry that the British monarchy could muster. Catherine and William rode in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, a magnificent vehicle made of aluminum and lined with silk damask. Through the large windows, they could see the thousands of people lining the streets, many waving flags and cheering as the procession passed. As their coach rolled slowly through the streets of London, Catherine reached across and took William's hand. The gesture was small, almost hidden from the cameras outside, but it represented the foundation of their partnership. Here they were, in one of the most public moments of their lives, surrounded by ceremony and tradition, yet still finding ways to connect with each other as simply William and Catherine. The couple who had fallen in love at university, the crowds along the processional route, were unlike anything London had seen in years. People from all walks of life had come together to witness this historic moment. Elderly women clutched handkerchiefs to their eyes, moved by the emotion of the day. Young children sat on their fathers' shoulders, Union Jack flags painted on their cheeks. Tourists held up phones and cameras, capturing their own piece of royal history. Inside the coach, William pointed out faces in the crowd to Catherine, both of them marveling at the diversity of people who had come to celebrate. There were families who had clearly planned for months, arriving with elaborate picnics and camping chairs. There were spontaneous visitors who had simply been drawn by the excitement of the day. There were people from the Commonwealth countries wearing traditional dress from their homelands, showing the global reach of the monarchy they were celebrating. Catherine noticed how William's face had changed throughout the day.
Oh.
The man beside her was no longer just her husband, but the heir apparent to the throne. The weight of that responsibility was visible in his posture, in the way he acknowledged the crowds, in the careful consideration he gave to every gesture. Yet when he looked at her, she still saw the young man who had nervously asked her to dance at a university party all those years ago. The coach passed Trafalgar Square, where the crowds were so thick that police had to work constantly to maintain order. Catherine could see people pressed against barriers, their faces bright with excitement and patriotic fervor. Many held homemade signs with messages of congratulations for the new king, but she also noticed several signs specifically for William and herself. Expressions of affection for the couple who represented the future of the monarchy as they approached Buckingham Palace. Catherine felt a familiar flutter of nerves. In a few minutes, they would step out onto the famous balcony to wave to the crowds gathered in front of the palace. It was a moment that would be broadcast around the world, photographed from every conceivable angle, and remembered as one of the defining images of King Charles's coronation day. The coach entered the palace gates to thunderous applause from the thousands gathered in the forecourt. Catherine could see people packed shoulder to shoulder, some who had been waiting for hours just to catch a glimpse of the royal family. The sea of Union Jack flags created a moving carpet of red, white, and blue that stretched as far as she could see. Inside the palace, there was a brief moment of calm before the balcony appearance. Catherine used the time to check her appearance one final time, ensuring that her tiara was perfectly positioned and her gown was flowing correctly. William straightened his uniform and shared a quiet word with their children, reminding them of their roles in the upcoming balcony moment. The family gathered in the room behind the famous balcony, where so many historic moments had been prepared over the decades. King Charles, still wearing his crown, looked both regal and slightly overwhelmed by the magnitude of the day. Queen Camilla stood beside him, her own crown glinting in the afternoon light filtering through the palace windows. When the doors to the balcony opened, the roar from the crowd below was overwhelming. Catherine felt the sound wash over her like a physical force as she stepped out into the afternoon sunlight. The sight that greeted them was extraordinary. Thousands upon thousands of people stretching back as far as the eye could see, all cheering and waving flags in celebration as the royal family arranged themselves along the balcony. Catherine found herself standing between William and young Princess Charlotte. The positioning felt symbolic, bridging the past and future of the monarchy in a single moment. She looked down at the crowd and felt a profound sense of responsibility to all these people who had come to celebrate their royal family. The traditional RAF flypast was scheduled to mark the climax of the balcony appearance. As the aircraft approached, Catherine could hear their engines growing louder over the cheers of the crowd. The moment when the red arrows would streak overhead in perfect formation, trailing red, white, and blue smoke, would provide the perfect finale to an already magical day. But it was during the wait for the flypast that the moment occurred which would soon become the most shared image from the entire coronation. As the family stood waving to the crowd, another gust of wind threatened Catherine's tiara. This time the movement was more pronounced, and several photographers captured the exact moment when William noticed and reached out to steady it. The gesture was even more tender than the one on the Abbey steps. Standing on the balcony in front of thousands of people, the cameras trained on their every move, William's protective instinct toward his wife was so natural, so unguarded, that it seemed to reveal the very essence of their relationship. His hand moved to steady the tiara with such gentle precision that it looked like a choreographed dance between two people who knew each other perfectly. The ceremony inside Westminster Abbey unfolded with the precision of centuries-old tradition. As the Archbishop of Canterbury began the ancient rituals, Catherine and William took their designated places among the congregation. The weight of history seemed to settle over the abbey like a gentle blanket. Connecting this moment to every coronation that had come before, Catherine sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, but her eyes never left her father-in-law as he prepared to receive the crown. The solemnity of the moment was not lost on her. She had married into this family as an outsider, a commoner who had won the heart of a future king. Now, 12 years later, she sat as an integral part of the institution that would one day be her own responsibility to uphold. William, seated beside her, occasionally glanced at his wife during the lengthy ceremony. Each time he did, something passed between them that the cameras couldn't quite capture, but that everyone watching seemed to feel. It was a silent communication, the kind that develops between couples who have weathered storms together and emerged stronger. Their shared glances spoke of mutual support, of two people facing an uncertain future, together with unwavering trust in each other. When the moment came for King Charles to receive St. Edward's crown, the abbey fell into complete silence. The golden crown, heavy with the weight of history and responsibility, was placed upon his head with ceremonial reverence. In that instant, everything changed. Charles was no longer the Prince of Wales, but the King of England. Ethelman and William automatically became the heir apparent. First in line to the throne, as the newly crowned King Charles rose from the coronation chair, his eyes found William and Catherine in the congregation. The look he gave them was one of both blessing and burden, passing from one generation to the next. Catherine felt the significance of that moment deep in her chest, understanding that her own coronation day was now not a distant possibility, but an inevitable future. The ceremony continued with the presentation of the regalia, each piece carrying its own centuries of symbolism: the golden orb, the royal scepter, the ceremonial rings. All passed from the archbishop to the new king with words that had been spoken at coronations for over 1,000 years. Catherine watched each moment with intense focus, knowing that one day she would witness William receiving these same symbols of power during the musical interludes. When the abbey choir's voices soared to the vaulted ceiling, Catherine allowed herself small moments of reflection. She thought of her parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, watching from their seats in the congregation. Their daughter, who had grown up in a modest home in Berkshire, was now sitting in Westminster Abbey as the future Queen of England. The magnitude of that transformation was almost impossible to comprehend. Young Prince George, serving as one of his grandfather's pages, performed his duties with remarkable composure for a 9-year-old. Catherine watched her eldest son with a mixture of pride and concern, knowing that he too was experiencing a defining moment in his young life. Today, he wasn't just Prince George. He was the boy who would one day wear the crown currently being placed on his grandfather's head. As the ceremony reached its climax with the crowning moment, Catherine felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The emotion wasn't just for the historic significance of the day, but for the personal journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought of all the times she had been criticized in the media, all the moments when she had felt uncertain about her place in the royal family, all the challenges she and William had faced together. When the congregation rose to sing "God Save the King" for the first time with Charles as the monarch, Catherine's voice joined the hundreds of others, filling the ancient space. But as she sang, her thoughts were already moving beyond this moment to what lay ahead. The challenges facing the monarchy, the changing world they would need to navigate, the responsibility of raising the next generation of royals. In an increasingly complex global landscape, the ceremony concluded with the traditional procession out of the abbey. As William and Catherine prepared to leave their seats, he offered her his arm with the same gentleness he had shown on their wedding day. Together, they walked down the aisle, their children following behind, the train of Catherine's gown flowing behind them like a river of silk and starlight. Outside the abbey, the crowds had grown even larger. The cheers were deafening as the newly expanded royal family emerged into the afternoon sunlight. But it was as they paused on the abbey steps, waiting for their car, that the moment occurred which would soon captivate social media and touch hearts around the world. A gust of wind caught Catherine's tiara, threatening to disturb its perfect placement. Without hesitation, William's hand moved to steady it, his fingers gentle against the crystal and pearl leaves. The gesture was so natural, so protective, so full of quiet intimacy that it seemed to encapsulate everything about their relationship. In a single moment, the photographers captured it from every angle. The way William's hand curved protectively around the tiara, grateful look Catherine gave him. The complete trust and comfort they showed with each other. Even in the middle of one of the most formal and public moments of their lives, it was a glimpse behind the royal facade, a moment of authentic human connection that resonated with everyone who witnessed it. The morning of May 6, 2023, dawned with unusual brightness over London. Westminster Abbey stood magnificent against the clear sky, its ancient stones ready to witness another chapter in British royal history. King Charles III would be crowned today. But something unexpected was about to unfold that would capture hearts across the world. Inside Kensington Palace, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her mirror in quiet contemplation.
The weight
of the day pressed upon her shoulders, not just from the elaborate ceremonial robes she would wear, but from the significance of what lay ahead. Today, her husband William would officially become the heir apparent to the throne, and she would stand beside him as his future queen. The dress she chose was no accident. Every thread, every pearl, every delicate embroidered detail had been carefully selected months in advance. The ivory silk crepe gown by Alexander McQueen flowed like liquid moonlight, its intricate silver threadwork catching the morning light that streamed through the palace windows. But it was her choice of jewelry that would soon set social media ablaze as Catherine's dresser carefully placed the crystal and pearl leaf tiara upon her head. Neither woman could have predicted the emotional response this moment would soon trigger. It's a headpiece, crafted by Jess Collett and originally worn by the late Queen Elizabeth II. It seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The delicate crystal leaves, intertwined with lustrous pearls, created a crown that spoke of both strength and grace. William, meanwhile, was preparing in his own chambers. The red and gold uniform of the Order of the Garter, laid out with military precision, as Colonel of the Welsh Guards. He would wear the ceremonial dress that had been worn by generations of British royalty before him. The gold braiding across his chest caught the light as he adjusted his collar, his thoughts turning to his father and the enormous responsibility that would soon rest upon Charles's shoulders. The couple's 3 children had been dressed and prepared hours earlier. Prince George, now 9 years old, fidgeted slightly in his page uniform, the red and gold fabric making him look far older than his years. Princess Charlotte, 8, smoothed her white dress with small, careful hands, while 5-year-old Prince Louis bounced excitedly between his siblings. Not yet fully understanding the gravity of the day, but sensing the anticipation that filled every corner of the palace. As the royal cars prepared to depart for Westminster Abbey, Catherine took one final look in the mirror, the woman staring. Back at her was no longer the university student who had caught William's eye at St. Andrews, nor the young woman who had walked down the aisle at her own wedding 12 years earlier. This was the future Queen of England. Today the world would see her step fully into that role. The streets of London were already packed with spectators, who had arrived before dawn to claim their spots along the processional route. Union Jack. Flags fluttered in the gentle breeze as crowds pressed against the barriers, cameras and phones held high in anticipation. Many had slept on the streets overnight, their dedication to witnessing this historic moment evident in their tired but excited faces. Inside the Abbey, distinguished guests from around the world had taken their seats. World leaders, celebrities, and members of European royal families filled the ancient pews, their formal attire creating a sea of elegant colors against the stone walls. The air hummed with quiet conversation and the rustle of programs as everyone awaited the arrival of the royal family. When the doors of the royal car opened outside Westminster Abbey, a hush fell over the crowd. Catherine emerged first, her gown cascading behind her like a waterfall of silken dreams. The tiara caught the camera flashes, sending sparks of light dancing across the Abbey steps. but it was something else entirely that would soon capture the world's attention. As William stepped out beside her, resplendent in his ceremonial uniform, he turned to help Catherine with her train. In that moment, as his white-gloved hand reached for hers, photographers captured something magical. The look that passed between them, a mixture of love, support, and shared understanding of the moment's significance, would soon become the image that defined their coronation day. The couple began their walk up the Abbey steps, their children following behind in perfect formation. Charlotte held Louis's hand while George walked with the dignity befitting his future role as king. The family moved as one unit, their bond visible to everyone watching, both in person and through the millions of television screens broadcasting the event worldwide. As they disappeared through the Abbey doors, the crowd outside erupted in cheers. Inside, the ancient building seemed to exhale in preparation for the ceremony that would change the course of British history. But nobody yet knew that within hours, a single photograph of William and Catherine would be shared millions of times across social media platforms, touching hearts and inspiring countless comments about love, partnership, and the enduring power of the monarchy to bring people together in moments of national celebration.